A couple of weeks ago, I shared some notes about how our cattle panel high tunnel in our chicken yard was really starting to hit a wall as far as what it could offer our hens, and we were bumping our heads on the ceiling, and so I wanted to go ahead and update that. I thought I would wait until we got things really dialed in and finalized and all that, but I thought I would just instead, more in the spirit of how I normally do things, share with you the carport upgrade to the cattle panel winter run for our hens. It's working great. It's been up for maybe 2 weeks now. Let me get into the details. Stick around. So this is now a pretty significant upgrade. I think it's about 12 feet wide and 20 feet long. It's 8 feet in the middle. And some real key things to convey from the outset. The carport itself was laying in a pile at our neighbor's spot. I talked about this in the last video when we started putting it up. So that was a reclaimed element for this project. The plastic that you see, this is all very rough sketch. There's going to be some proper door. In fact, that's the old door from the cattle panel high tunnel. I was too frozen to get that out. But anyway, the plastic is reclaimed from a greenhouse that was getting thrown out, or from the plastic that was getting thrown out. So this whole thing is basically reclaimed top to bottom. In fact, on the inside, in the last video, I made a note how I found these insulated sheets, which somebody had mentioned are used for curing concrete. Really visually unappealing, but functionally quite nice. They're clipped in a way where on the coldest nights we can lay them down over the compost to preserve things, and by day we can bring them up and clip them with binder clips. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's explain what actually happened in the structure of this. I took a fair bit of video shots while we were putting this together, but it was brutally cold when we were assembling this. It was actually quite a hard project to do. As ragamuffin and rinky-dink as it looks, it was a tough project. The ground was rock solid frozen. So in order to keep the frame from lifting up with wind load, I pounded in some really sharpened locust staves into the ground and attached some runner boards along to that. So the structure itself is tied off to the earth with some 14 gauge wire. And so that keeps it from wanting to lift. Some folks had made some really great suggestions of, hey, what about spanning the top with the cattle panels themselves? So in fact, a lot of people mentioned that. I was thinking about that, but the weight was too much. And so what we did is kind of wove this web of 14 gauge wire, which I've used in the past as a way to kind of span roof areas. And it's a very, very light amount of material, but it does a decent job of holding the plastic. It had a really good solid test run with about an 8-inch snow about a week ago. I took some shots of that, and certainly needed to be swept off, I think, without any sweeping at all. It could have crushed it, but it did okay. Juan and I also added on one side, and I'll add to the other side at some point, but there are these locust posts. These are scrap wood that we got from a mill nearby. They're just screwed in. They've got little feet on the bottom, and they're screwed into the old structure from the cattle panel high tunnel that was here. On this side, it actually worked out just fine. And so they're screwed in at the bottom, and then they go up and have a board screwed into the two of them, and then they're tied off to the frame. And so this really keeps the center metal from wanting to come down at all. I think I'll do that to the other side as well. But for the price, the only thing I paid for in this whole structure was a couple of bolts and nuts that were missing from the metal structure. So it was about under 10 bucks or so for this whole thing. It looks like it, but it really works too. You can see that the frame from the old door, just how remarkably wonky that old cattle panel tunnel was. It's still here. I'll take that apart when the ground thaws a little bit more from underneath. It just was easiest to leave it for now. We're going to cache a whole bunch of compost on this end of the high tunnel and take it out once we get warm enough that we can start top dressing beds. This compost is nearly finished. So it's really nice to have enough room in here to have an active composting system, but also cache material while we wait for spring thaw. It can really feel quite temporary as far as the plastic, the way that aspect was designed. And the reason for that is because we're in February here. We're not too far off from not needing this plastic at all anyway. And so rather than doing a really thorough full design, we put it over. It's actually on the front and back, it's simply weighed down with mulch and snow and ice, and that keeps it from the wind sneaking under. And in the spring, or sometime in the summer, maybe in the fall, we'll reframe, do an actual really nice wooden frame for the whole thing, polycarbonate doors and the like. But for now, it actually just works fine enough, so maybe it's what we do with it. Since the plastic was free, we used a piece I miscalculated, and it didn't go all the way to the ground, which is kind of fun. But we were able to batten in some locust staves and use some old hay binding wire. You can see the string there tied off to little screws that are on those battens, and that's pulled tight to the frame. And we've had some extremely windy nights, and it has not lifted off or pulled away. So it feels like a very simple way to take plastic that was not big enough, but make it good enough to work enough for us. And I went to this back area. We had cached a whole bunch of wood chips back here in the fall. I was really pleasantly surprised that by putting some deep wood chips before the real deep cold of winter came, the compost that was out here kept all the red wigglers alive. This area has experienced -15 Fahrenheit and many nights right in the single digits, and I guess underneath a foot or two of wood chips it is still teeming with red wigglers, so that was a very nice surprise. So certainly in the realm of a rough sketch, but significant upgrade for us, and I understand the aesthetics might be a little lacking for folks that like really tidy, fancy yards, chicken yards, but the embodied energy on this one feels pretty legit to me. It's insulated plastic that was on the side of the road to be thrown out, to insulate under a carport that was laying on the ground at a neighbor's spot, supported by lumber that was getting tossed at a mill, and the whole thing covered with poly that was getting ripped off of an old greenhouse. So many more upgrade layers to be sure, cleaning up the door on that side, figuring out a way to frame out the exit side, the downslope side, as well as how material comes in through this whole area. So I'll take some input. If folks have ideas or suggestions, please feel free to share them. But for now, we've got our 80 some odd hens having way more room than they need to have lovely relaxed days standing on steaming compost and eating lots of food scraps. So let me know if you have some comments or questions or concerns. Let me know what you think about all this wackiness, and we'll keep sharing notes as we go. Thanks for watching.